First off, everyone, just thank you for joining and listening in today. And also a big thank you to Sidebar for giving me the space to share my learnings. I'm also very thankful for Kim, who's going to be moderating the chat today because I plan to give you lots of information and she's going to help make sure that everyone is getting the insights, answers as I focus on delivering the message. And with
Awesome.
such a short time, we want to make sure that all of the content is supported and any discussions going on. So make sure you're utilizing the chat. And if we miss anything, we'll follow up afterwards. Then you might be wondering why I called this execution leverage. The reality is that terms like burnout, overwhelm, and decision fatigue have become common phrases in life and business. My goal today is to give you at least one nugget you can take away immediately from the conversation to move anything that feels stuck. Move it forward. A little bit about me. You'll notice I don't read the slides. I'll trust you'll read them as I provide context. And long story short, I'm a self-proclaimed business nerd. I love studying people, behaviors, and business to comprehend the mesh network that creates outcomes. In my head, these things are a mashup of a journey and a puzzle that come together like a math formula that creates individual outcomes. Some things are constant, while everything else is a variable, which defines the uniqueness. A note of transparency. I love the space of working with individuals and teams directly. I'm used to applying my knowledge and engaging with people based on their specific situation. So in this space, it's a little bit different and unique for me, so bear with me. I just ask that you're willing or if you're willing to turn on your cameras so I don't feel like I'm speaking so much into the void. It just helps me read the faces so I know if what I'm saying is losing you or resonating. And long story short, deep down, my passion and focus is making sure others are successful and maximizing their results. Just in my teachings, I need to make sure that the time you're spending here is more worthwhile than what all the things your brain is telling you. Right now, it's probably telling you you could be doing this, you could be doing that. So let's make sure you're getting the most value out of the time you're spending here. And again, just thank you for the time. I know that can be a big lift sometimes. All right. So before we really dive in, let's talk about the big picture. Whether it's through my Kinetic Method program or business advising services, I'm not the type that just dumps a system or tools on someone and leaves them hanging. I honestly find it super ineffective. I like to create distinction between the current state and the future state while also describing the science and neurology that has greater impact on results than what we actually give it credit for. That's why in this short time, you'll notice I'm going to share suggestions of quick applications to move you forward, but we'll also describe why you feel stuck so you can recognize the mental hurdles that accompany the broken tools. My structure for today is just to showcase why tools fail, expose the real outcomes, and disrupt the conditioning you've been taught to create the outcomes with less effort. As we navigate the time together, please make sure you have some paper ready to complete the exercises. I've also included a QR code if you want at the top of this. It will also be available at the end. It's just a mini workbook that has some structure to it if you want to leverage that. And either way, just be prepared to write or type and get the information out of your head that I will provide direction towards. All right, let's talk about how your brain actually works versus what you've been taught of how to utilize it. Your brain is extremely similar to a computer. Storage and memory slows the processors. The more that runs in the background, the less it can focus on what's directly needed. Interestingly, when your computer starts slowing down, what do? You restart it, you clear the memory, and that all improves the processor. But when it's happening in our brain, what do? We tend to pile more on. In school, you were taught to memorize. From the moment you started learning, you were taught to use your brain for storage, not for processing. So now you're going through life and nothing is predictable. Memory functions on knowns and past findings. But now something new gets thrown at you and you feel nothing, or you feel, I guess, let's take that back. You feel everything but prepared. Your experience isn't because you didn't do enough, it's because you haven't been taught how to navigate it. You've only been taught how to react. So let's talk about what's taking up storage space and memory. All those things living rent free in your head, you know, the things you need to do today, your grocery list, the expectations of others, your team's needs, what you need to build for your business, all of those things, Those are open loops. And open loops are similar to open tabs in your browser. So I'd like you to take a moment and put in the chat and just think about how many open loops or open tabs you have in your head right now. Take a wild guess. If you were to count them, how many would it be? And in a moment, we'll come back to that information, but I'd like to set that aside and we'll reflect on it. The first thing we can do to improve your energy is to stop using your brain as storage and start prepping it to be used as a processor. I'd like you to take 90 seconds and just brain dump. All I want you to do is write all the things competing for your attention and energy. Write everything. No details, just summaries. It could be anything from picking up the kids to the report you need to write, the call you need to make, the expectation of your boss, your partner. If it surfaces, you need to write it. And don't worry about being perfect, complete, or organized. Just write. I'm going to put 90 seconds on a timer. I had music planned, but come to find out that this isn't going to let you hear it. So you get to resonate in your own silence, but take 90 seconds and just dump everything that resonates of something that's living rent free in your head. If anyone's daring, feel free to hum. I'll end in 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to make a quick call out. I don't know about anybody else, but 90 seconds of pure silence is so uncomfortable. So we all get to feel this uncomfortableness together. So thanks for bearing with me on that one. Whew, that was rough. All right, so likely you didn't complete the list, but let's talk about what you did accomplish in those 90 seconds. Sorry, I'm still laughing at the uncomfortableness. What you did is you reduced the cognitive load of all the things. You allowed your brain to work like it's supposed to. It now sees what's in front of you, and that allows it to evaluate, organize, and process the information. Before that, it was trying to balance memory, tracking, remembering decisions with which creates a vicious loop. You'll notice that some of the things in front of you can now be possibly delegated, or maybe it has opportunity to be navigated by somebody else, or you may even just realize that it was taking up more space than you possibly gave it value or attention, or you didn't even realize how much space it was taking. And even if it's a mess, your brain can now see the bigger picture and consciously choose the next steps. So, in those 90 seconds, you actually freed up the capacity and gave your brain the trust it needed to move from memory recall to external processing. Now, entertain me for a minute and just think about as you brain dumped that information, how many open loops did you list? Or how many are still not complete? And in the chat, tell us what your before was, what your after, and if you realize anything. Is it significantly different? Is it less of a burden than you imagined it was? What is it that you're recognizing from it? The reality is that even if the number is bigger than expected, you're now more equipped to navigate it compared to when it was living rent free in your head. And that relief you feel, it isn't unique. It's the burden we carry. Imagine everyone around you carrying that same burden. See how fast it adds up and why we see burnout, overwhelm, and exhaustion throughout the workplace? So let's get real. What if we freed up the processing in your brain that was used for storage? It doesn't really matter, right? You now freed up that space, but to do what with it? That hasn't changed how you actually navigate the information. And before we define if I can say my words, if we can dive into the tacticals, we'll evaluate what's really happening internally. So previously I mentioned the conditioning of school. There is more to what other conditionings we incurred. In school, your teacher built the flow and structure to navigate for you. Every step along the way, you received a dopamine hit by completing the task, but you never had time to think about the bigger outcome or what needed to come next. Here's an example. You didn't learn multiplication overnight. You were taught small incremental nuggets and knowledge that over time, with layering, created the outcome. Now you're able to multiply. But someone built the path for you to achieve the targeted result, and it worked. But just because you didn't build it doesn't mean that it wasn't valuable. And now you're adulting. No one's there to build the paths for you. You just start executing. You're building the airplane at the same time as flying it. When you look at this from that reality, no wonder burnout, overwhelm, and exhaustion is common. It's actually predictable. If you're like most, you're likely sitting there with a planner, hoping that it magically creates outcomes. And if you just figure one thing out, everything else will fall into place. But then it doesn't. Reality surfaces, you're carrying the weight of everyone's expectations on top of your own. You probably feel like you're drowning and everything is compiling. Then your brain starts in, and you're likely beating yourself up emotionally. Truth is, everyone around you is probably feeling the same. I'm not saying that to minimize you at all. I'm saying that because you're stuck in the same loop and want better outcomes. Now I ask that you give yourself grace. Not just the grace that you give yourself, the kind that you give to everybody else, which is often more than we give ourselves. Accept this truth. You don't know what you don't know. And you did nothing wrong, and now you're ready to learn what you haven't been taught. So now we'll get into a little bit more of the tacticals.
I think it might be an interesting pause in the
Yeah.
conversation if we go back to that question, that prompt that you talked about,
Yes.
where between us first initially thinking about the open tabs and then thinking a little bit more deeper about what might have been realized when we actually took a look at those open tabs.
Yes.
Nicole has an interesting comment as well. Nicole, are you free to get off mute to talk a little bit about your comment?
Hey Kim, Shira, thanks for giving me the chance. I won't name the actual milestone, but in my life, I'm going through like a significant life change that's going to affect the next several decades of my life and, naturally my career and my business life. So I guess in my
Congratulations.
case, I actually feel like 6 of the 9 items that I listed during the exercise are not, insignificant. I'm grappling with the types of things you go through when, if your family's expanding or, you're helping elderly parents or whatever it is that you may be transitioning or, moving your family and things like that. These are large things, and I think it still does help to list it out, even the larger items, not just the smaller initiatives, if you will,
Yeah.
and give yourself that grace, right? And realize that there's also some logistical processing, not just only emotional load. And maybe the ways that you're going through the different strategies. Sure, I appreciate processes that are, tried and true for various types of things that weigh you down. So, but I did want to acknowledge that not it doesn't always minimize when you write it down.
Yes. Oh, agreed. Completely understand. And exactly what you described. Oftentimes, even if we've been told to brain dump, we are told to only brain dump the things that's either on our to-do list or our task list. And that's not the only thing that's weighing on us. As you described, you might have to be taking care of family expectations. There's so much more that falls into place, and we oftentimes don't give it enough credit or visibility, and it makes it harder for us to process, but it ends up weighing on us long term.
Shira, I was also, Nicole, as I was listening to you, I was also realizing it sounds like there was almost as you were thinking through things, there was a subconscious part of the mental load that you didn't have a chance to acknowledge until then, where you had nine open loops that you were conscious of, six of them were serious, but in reality, you actually had 30 plus, and it just gave you an opportunity to at least acknowledge you had a bigger mental load that even you consciously kind of rotate within your head.
Yes, oftentimes we're still storing all of those some days, what ifs, all of the different scenarios that could possibly play out. And putting that in front of us allows us a lot more visibility to make decisions from it. Otherwise, it's just holding capacity that we can't even process. And we oftentimes, until you start to do that brain dump, you don't realize how many things are actually living rent free. And now you get to make that conscious decision. Should it still remain there, or did I consciously decide, oh, I really don't want to give that any more attention? Let's take that off the list.
Yeah, I certainly
There's
want
a
the group to be able to move on and not hog. I think that the one thing I would call out that maybe others are experiencing too is that when I write my to-do list, if you will, I do apply some of my skills there because I've always had a lot of like dynamic things going on, and they're not always very one dimensional. But I did notice that when I just did the exercise that Shira suggested, I actually listed bigger items. I didn't just list my to-do items. I listed the things that are really living in my head. So I recognize the difference between what I normally would write down and perhaps what I need to be assessing kind of higher level.
yes. I'm glad that you took the time to do that and express everything because oftentimes we don't realize how much we're still storing when we don't do it all because we're ignoring that component of it that's still competing for your energy, time, space, focus. So even if we don't realize that it's competing, it still is. We have cannibalization that happens in our brains.
Mhm.
Love it. Thank you for sharing, Nicole.
I'm happy to. Thank you.
All right. So as we get into more of some of the tactical structure of how we can set ourselves up for success and navigate just the way our brain processes, there is a much bigger picture and structure that I like to teach, and I'm going to walk us through some of these components of it. Obviously, we have a short time frame, so we'll just focus on directional improvement. But right now, you've taken the time to do the brain dump in the list. So I want you to take one of those items that is a multi-step project or initiative or outcome. Maybe it's creating something. Maybe it's achieving an outcome like visibility or some team metric. Whatever it is, it should be something that incorporates multiple steps or deliverables to achieve the end result. Now, I want you to think about what the end goal looks like and be very clear. It also needs to be within your control. So if the initiative is delivering a product to a customer site, maybe your criteria of done is just completing the step in your scope, which may end at the handoff to another group. If the initiative is creating a plan and you're doing it all yourself, maybe the initiative is establishing the draft, not the completed product shipped. And this is important because oftentimes we expose a larger target and that makes us feel like we're debilitated from the beginning of what could actually be done. And then we hold ourselves accountable to what we can't control. And there are times where we need to focus on the very end target, but there's other times that we need to find a target somewhere in between. And what's going to set you up for success is being realistic to what's in your control and deemed viable. So, too often we shoot for the stars, we set targets that are too far in the distance and don't allow for adjustment or findings. If it doesn't complete and we are gold plating, that means we have decided the target beyond what's even viable. So, we need to be able to better define where our next goal outcome is. So, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. I don't think it'll take you too long, but write down what you would perceive the criteria of done being. And again, sorry, no sound. If you have more than one initiative and get done quick, feel free to pull in another one and define that. All right. So in the chat, if you're willing to entertain and just share your insights, it might help others. Define what you chose as your target and say what it could have possibly been versus what you selected and why. Someone might have that same scenario or situation, and maybe they haven't thought about how they can either shrink it down or create multiple bigger steps to achieve it, or maybe it does need to be packaged into one full outcome. And then we're going to continue to take these a few more steps. You'll notice that this is a multi-step process in this activity. And the reason is we're building the framework. Just as I described in the example with your teachers of them setting up that structure for you to navigate, you're going to do the same outcome, but learn how to do it for yourself. So the next 90 seconds, I want you to once again extract what you know from your brain and get it in front of you. It's another brain dump exercise, but we're really just going to focus on that one initiative that's multi-package. And trust the fact that you don't know everything. This is not a testament of how much you know or how complete it is. This is just for you to document what you do know and start to just build that framework. You can't put walls on a house if you don't have the wood framing up in place. We're working on wood framing. So just for the initiative you just wrote, what are all the things that need to come together to achieve the big outcome? These are things that you should be able to predict, but maybe you don't know the extent of it. And if you don't know the extent, use it as a placeholder. This isn't perfection. It can be out of order, and some things may run in parallel. Truly, there is no perfection process to this. Right now, you're just writing your assumptions, your predictions, and then you're establishing guidance in what your initial outlook is for the whole package. And then in these milestones, these are really just big package outcomes. So I'm going to use an example here. Maybe it's requirements and quality checks, and then documentation if you were to put a product together. And in the unlikelihood that you do get done early, work on another initiative, but I'll provide 90 seconds or it's 90 seconds starting now. Got 30 seconds left. Whoops. All right. That's been 90 seconds. So I do want to chat about this after the next section. So first, let's just talk about what you've accomplished. Right now, you've freed up capacity for processing. You're not leveraging storage or memory or relying on recall. Typically, what we do is we just jump in and we start doing and start executing. And we've tried to figure it out along the way. And what that relies on is that memory recall. Am I tracking all the information in my head? How do I know when to pull the information out? So instead, you're now relying on your capabilities to process the information at hand, and it's already organized and sorted out for you. So you've started to make those decisions once rather than multiple times over. And this significantly reduces delayed decision making. It also reduces the reprocessing of information over and over unnecessarily. And overall, you're saving time and energy. So Before I really dig into some of the elements on this, I just want to fine tune again. Since you're already in the process of it, let's focus on fine tuning one more element down. Right now, you've looked at it from a bigger picture element, but let's talk about it in developments of steps. So, where I want you to take the time now is to repeat the last step, but just try to get it down to a bite-sized chunk that you'd write on your to-do list. For each of those packages, what tasks or sub-steps need to come together to achieve the milestone and show progress? Oftentimes, milestones take time to achieve and may require multiple contributions or outcomes to create the result. But we oftentimes dismiss that when it actually comes to time for execution. So, using an example, if we were to use quality as a milestone in this, you would say that the quality requires a consolidation of multiple things, which includes requirements, definitions, maybe testing, approvals. And if you're doing the planner, a planner index is the completion of multiple steps, which would include, say, a planner structure, the layout, some non-header pages, and break some of these down. See how many you can break down just thinking about the sub steps that would end up showing up on your to-do list. And I'll give you 90 seconds for this one. 15 seconds. Okay. So I'm going to jump this into a discussion here in a second because I already know probably what you're thinking. And while we're having this discussion, I would like you to take this one step further and just entertain putting how much time estimate you think it'll take for these tasks. Put it next to it as we have this discussion. And you're probably thinking, Shy, you're losing me. Hate this process. I'm extremely uncomfortable with this. Where I've seen people tell me before, obviously, I need to organize my framework and it makes me uncomfortable just thinking about it. It seems so much bigger or it seems tedious. I just want to move on from this. So let me ask, did you feel the sense to resist this? Likely you did. And it's okay if you did. But this is where neurology bites us over and over. So I want you to sit in the feeling of resistance if you're feeling it. And is it possible that you're just feeling uncomfortable? And likely that's happening. So let's talk about why this happens in this moment. Truth is, society is built on immediate dopamine releases. The moment we start to feel uncomfortable, we delay that discomfort, even if it comes at a greater toll later. Internally, our brain immediately tells us a story. It says, that's bigger than what I want to think about right now. Or something else is more pressing. Or I'll figure it out later. You name it, your brain is telling you a different story. And that keeps you from actually executing or executing effectively. And that's what the reality is your brain just became neurotic. You're no longer using the structure, you're allowing your brain to tell stories, and that's keeping you from being effective in your execution. So if you're willing to entertain me, who will admit to either feeling that or what other feelings came up through this process? And how much resistance do you feel? Or feel free to put it in the chat.
All right, since everybody already knows that I'm dealing with some stuff, I will I will go. I will say in my past life before being a founder, I actually did have a role as a project manager. So a lot of these frameworks remind me of what I did in real life, in professional life, and I was very good at it. I executed with teams and challenges and, pushed the ball forward while also enabling, growth and development. And I became better at that, the growth and development as I became more mature as well. But that said, I don't know what happened, but now I'm so much more focused on strategy and sometimes getting to the science of getting a project done by their executed steps is more challenging these days. Um, so I just want to admit that it didn't scare me to estimate. That didn't get me, but realizing what I've been doing and some of the things that have been holding me back from some of my most challenging, gnarly, emotionally taxing things that I need to get done, like project size that I need to get done. It is good to admit that I am going through that a bit, especially in my personal life.
I love exactly what you described. So absolutely, it's no surprise or there's no hidden agenda here that this really does, in some elements, follow the project management framework. And what I always found interesting in business or in our daily lives is most things still show up as a project structure or a milestone, a step outcome, but we expect that the only people who can build those structures are project managers. We don't build those into our daily lives. We don't build that into the structure. And if we don't have a project manager managing our outcomes, just as in these examples, our teachers were our project managers. So we don't take the accountability and the ownership to do that ourselves. So this is the reminder to look at it from different lenses. Not everything is a project, but sometimes our own goals and initiatives, as you described, your strategy for your business, or even the maybe you're prepping to redo your entire kitchen yourself. All of those things still have multiple steps. They're using up your energy. They're all competing for your priorities and focus, but yet we don't treat them in the same structure that helps us take that information out of our brains and put it into a structure we can navigate. So I really appreciate that you gave that insight because that's exactly why we need to look at it, not just from a tactical tool lens, or that if this only falls into the space of project, excuse me, project management. It allows us to recognize there's a lot of weight we're carrying, and if we utilize some of these tools that we navigate in other areas of business, we could actually be more effective and functional in our own personal lives, or just if we're leaders or even running our own businesses. There's so many ways we can incorporate these to be more effective in a bigger picture.
Yep.
Anyone else want to share? Kim, was there anything in the chat to call out?
Gary also shared something that he does for himself as well. Gary, I don't know if you want to elaborate or share a little bit more of what might have happened for you during this exercise.
Yeah, I think I started meditating about 8 months ago when, so it kind of helped to clarify, mindfulness. Like you're in a room with all these balloons and each one is something you have to get done or competing, etc. And I never really associated that on the business side. But I'm finding that I've kind of, I don't know, mentally separated things or so I don't have like this huge to-do list anymore like I always used to at my right hand side. I know these things have to be done, but I'll just sort of take, okay, well, the next 2 hours I'm going to work on this website or I'm going to do this. And I kind of multitask, but not at the same time. It's sort of like during a day. Um, so I just found that interesting. This kind of made me realize like I don't have all these business ideas competing for my attention at the same time anymore than I used to.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great outcome. And my focus here is to help bring, we haven't been taught these tools. Oftentimes you only learn it when you're going to get a PMP certification, things like that. But look how fast and easy it was to apply it and how much tangible information you have to work with now. And if all of our teams were just given a little bit of guidance of how to leverage this more, imagine how much the translation of overwhelm, burnout, exhaustion would actually transition to feeling like they have the tools for success. They could clarify the details better. They can now articulate what's happening and be able to translate that information, communicate it better because it's already been taught to them how to get that out in front of them rather than racking their brain every time the question comes up. So it's one thing to be able to discuss what your brain is doing to tell the story, but this is how we actually take control and narrate the story for our brains. The activity it didn't make the work any bigger or smaller, but it did, however, take the power away from your brain in allowing it to tell a story that may oftentimes amplify how we're feeling or exaggerate the results of it. It also helps right size the package. Let me ask you this. When you were putting the times around it, did it quickly add up? And would you have given it the same amount of estimate if your boss asked you from the beginning when you just said, "Here's my initiative," and you need to deliver that? What would you have estimated the time versus now that you're breaking down everything into consumable steps? Does it expand it? And the answer might be yes, the answer might be no. But either way, it's a lot easier to navigate the outcome or the prediction when you're a lot closer to the outcome than it is to be completely off and having to do a lot more reactivity when you're missing deadlines, delays, anticipated accomplishments. It also alleviates the thoughts in your brain of feeling like you didn't do enough when you could have predicted that it would take longer than you realize.
Shira, just to
Yeah.
share, as I'm going through this exercise, I'm finding myself gaining the clarity, giving me more confidence that I can accomplish what I've got in my mind for my next goal. And I'm finding myself prioritizing based upon potential outcomes and impact I'm going to drive, which goes back to like the original, what am I really trying to get to? So it's naturally helping me prioritize and then also time blocking much more effectively towards that prioritization.
Love it. Thank you for sharing that because that is truly the outcome and goal I want. The more clarity we have, the more confidence you gain. And it may seem heavy to do this step, but think about how much time you've committed so far, about 4.5 minutes to doing the work, and look at how much clarity and how much alleviated energy or how much energy you've built by just taking that small amount of time. If you only took 5 minutes to put some organization or some frameworks in place, it's at least reducing the decision making that you're making later. And we're going to discuss further what decision fatigue is and how it happens. And here you've already taken many of the steps that would have alleviated the feelings of the overwhelm that comes later because you took just a few minutes to organize your thoughts and get it out of your head to over process versus putting it right in front of you where you process it once. And then, as I mentioned, I mean, you've spent maybe 5 minutes doing this effort so far, and you can equate that to basically going to get a cup of coffee. And within that amount of time, you've just alleviated the discomfort of planning and alleviated the pain of executing without one. So when you're thinking about the effort it takes, again, you're allowing yourself to tell the story rather than just giving yourself, even if it's a small amount of time, just committing to doing it and seeing how much effort it creates from there. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to talk about decision fatigue. I honestly, and you probably experienced this maybe in some other lessons, but I could have left this entire presentation right where we're at and just left you with organized thoughts, right? Sure, that's helpful, but that's honestly for me just not disruptive enough. I really want to make sure that you have a framework to now build on. And I want to give you a step in the direction of executing effectively. I'm going to ask you a question, and this may or may not be you, but I hear this so often. Are you the type that wakes up every morning, you sit down, pull out your planner or to-do list, and you look at what you didn't accomplish yesterday and start writing the majority of that on a new list today? Maybe that's not you. Maybe you just have it stored in your head. But let me ask, how does that make you feel every morning starting off in that realm? I tend to notice that people feel guilt for not getting as much done as they wanted to. They feel overwhelmed at the expectations that are sitting there in front of them. And they fear that, or now they have fear of what distractions and interruptions may show up during the day. If this is you, how does that impact the rest of your day? Do you really want to start every day from guilt, fear, overwhelm? Or if you're managing a team, is that the mentality you want them sharing around the workplace? So once again, the tools we've been provided are not equipping us for success. I hate to say it, but we have to look at it through some objective lenses. So let's take a little step further. So far, you've prepared your list and plans for the day, and it's time to execute. Do you know what's really happening behind the scenes? Probably don't, so I'm going to break it down. You're making decisions over and over, but you probably don't even realize how many you're actually making. Let's say your meeting ends early and you find 30 minutes of free time. You start navigating your to-do list, and every line item you read or what's storing in your brain, you're trying to remember all of the information in there. You start to ask yourself these questions. How long will this take? Do I have the energy for it? Can I even fit this in? Is this the right priority? You make those decisions in your head, then you move to the next item and you read this next question or you read the next to do item and you ask yourself the same questions. Store it. And every time you do that, you're repeating it over and over until you get to the entire list. Now you've read through that list and now you're thinking to yourself, okay, what did I decide in all of those? And you're trying to quickly refresh, and it's just a vicious cycle that we create. By the end of your list, you're overwhelmed, your energy is now exhausted, and you've given up making progress on anything. Does anyone feel like that sounds very familiar to their day to day? I know I used to have a bad habit of that, and I'm sure many others have. Let's let's give yourself grace. Your intentions were there, but the hidden processing your brain is doing just debilitated any progress you could have made. Repeat that over and over throughout your day, and we wonder why burnout is our common language. It's, and I like to put it in here when people ask me how else I put that analogy together, but I always think about Steve Jobs. He purchases shirts, pants, his entire wardrobe in significant quantities. What it did for him is it saved him the thought process and the decisions that he needed to make every day of using those decisions he could use on something bigger that helped him go, I don't need to waste my decision making capacity on what I need to wear during the day. I'm confident, I'm comfortable in these, so I will just wake up every day and wear the same thing. They're clean, I'll buy multiple of them. And he understood because of the capacity limitations that one decision has greater impact throughout the day. And your brain is no different than Steve Jobs. You only have so much decision making capacity each day. So, my suggestion as one little quick nugget of information to take with you through the day is earlier I asked you to start estimating your time in your initiative steps. Do the same thing, whether it's an initiative step or it's on your to-do list, even if it's you putting down, I just need to make a phone call, estimate the time for it. It's under 10 minutes. Now you know to go grab it and write the time next to it, whether it's 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, multiple hours. That gives you an opportunity to recognize that you can actually break it down further. Write it once. You no longer have to process that decision over and over. If you want to kick it up a notch, I suggest that you group it by time estimates. Now, what you've done, instead of having a super long to-do list, you now have time chunked items. This doesn't show up on your schedule. It's just something where you go, I have 10 minutes that freed up. I know to look at my 10-minute list and I can get 3 calls done in that amount of time. See how much decision making you now are no longer processing? Then, if you want bonus points and you're willing to adapt a little bit and do a little bit of change, what I suggest is stop doing a daily to-do list. Write it once for the entire week. Because as I shared earlier, writing your to-do list every single day, you don't realize it, but you've lost an entire day over the course of a year by writing it every day. Imagine what you could do with 24 hours back into your life. And then that doesn't even talk about the energy drain or the overwhelm you feel before you even start off your day. So my biggest suggestion is start turning your list into a weekly view and allow yourself the space for things to roll over. You'll feel less fear about what interruptions happen during the day and you'll welcome them a bit more because you can look at it differently. And then track it. If you don't like my idea, throw it out there for a couple weeks and just see how your energy level changes and how your day feels when you're navigating it from a weekly view versus a to-do list. And I can almost guarantee, I bet that your energy improves significantly. What do those suggestions open or unlock for you? Does that make you uncomfortable? What's your gut reaction by those three suggestions? Feel free to drop in the chat or jump in and chat.
Not to call you out, Nicole. However, we've been kind of on this journey today with you. So, do you have any additional comments?
Chuckling over here. Okay, so I probably do a combination, admittedly, of the weekly goals and kind of things that fit into the capacity I seem to have for a particular week, also tied to a theme for the week that might be related to an event that I'm participating in or a conference that I'm speaking at. So there's kind of this uh, preview that I have of the next 3 weeks and what will flow within each week at a high level. But then I admittedly do a daily refresh where I don't have a lot of guilt for carrying things over. I know that's going to happen. I'm in a chaotic space where there's a lot of change, so every day and a lot of things I can't control. So I've rationalized that, but I do like that you've written it out this way, Shira, and that you recommend everyone to look at that weekly view and then within that week allow for the chaos, interruptions, real life. Um, I think it reinforces some things that I'm doing, but it also might strengthen leaning into the weekly even more. That's my sense.
Yes. And if you have daily deadlines, you'll incorporate that into your structure. The overall goal is if you're recognizing that you are constantly writing the same information over and over and you're not truly processing what can I actually get done during the week that's realistic, we're just setting ourselves up for frustrations and feelings of failure when really we're not failing, we're making progress, but we just don't give ourselves the capacity to see it. And oftentimes, when we give ourselves more time without the repeated writing, it forces us to really think, what do I think I can get done during the week? How far off was I on my target? It helps us better estimate. But when we get into a habit of just writing things to write it, we're not really processing that information. Thank you for continuously sharing, Nicole. I really appreciate it. I love that we're all on the journey with you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. So,
Shira,
yeah.
I'll share a little bit too. What I have realized is as I did a quick weekly view, given that although today is only Tuesday, this actually works for my week right now. When I did the prioritization, this quickly enabled me to estimate the amount of time I want to dedicate towards the prioritization. And then I gave myself a total, which I realized was actually a lot less than I reactively anticipated. And it's given me excitement, it's given me energy, and it's given me a sense of I've set myself up for success as preparation versus planning. Where I find if I think about this as like, this has got to be my plan, it makes it seem like I have to dedicate this, I'm committed to it, versus this is how I'm preparing for my week. And it gives me this like natural sense of flexibility. And maybe others don't consider the nuance anything, but for me, this feels like preparation versus a structured, committed, like rigid plan.
Yes. It's extremely flexible. This is really just to give you data and insights of a benchmark. If you sometimes if we don't put numbers in, we'll spend so much time researching that we don't realize that we just spent 3 hours navigating something versus when we said, I'm just gonna give myself 30 minutes and figure it out. Or we recognize that there's so much that we get overwhelmed by the idea of the list versus recognizing, oh, wow, this really should only take me a few hours to do, but the thought of it was drowning me, right? So the goal of this is not to say this is your rigid structure. This is really just supposed to help you gain insights to quiet the story that your brain's going to tell you that either overcommits, under executes, or just keeps you from doing anything and gives you that paralysis of, oh my God, it's just too much. I need to just shut down. It's really just the supportive element of your neurology working for you versus against you, which is what we tend to allow happen because we just didn't know that it's happening. I know we only have a few minutes left, so we'll go through. There's no more information or no more activities. This is really just the insights, and I would love to see what everyone's getting out of it. And please put in the chat. But recognize you spent 60 minutes here, and hopefully that unlocked the leverage you gained by executing outcomes effectively. You should now recognize that getting unstuck isn't a reflection, or yeah, getting stuck isn't a reflection of you. It's the conditioning created by the tools and systems you've been taught. Even a minimal amount of planning improves execution capacity significantly. And the more comprehensive the planning, the less emotional, mental, and physical drainage that happens during the execution phase. So making the entire outcome occur faster and with less effort. You're no longer spending so much time in the reactivity or the feelings of the what ifs. You just have the capacity to execute. And recognizing discomfort is not something that can be skipped. All you're doing is delaying it. And when you delay it, it has a bigger impact later, and you're actually in a state where you have to deal with that discomfort at a higher level. And lastly, storing thoughts and decisions rather than extracting it actually debilitates your power to execute before you even start. If you made a decision, even as small as estimating time to do a step, write it once and allow it to be part of the process, not your memory recall. Put in the chat. I always love to hear everyone's aha moments of these things, what resonated. Sometimes you have a structure or a system that's working for you, and there's components where adding a little element to it may improve and unlock something else. And I'd love to see what you're going to apply. And then just take a moment and reflect on what little time we had and recognize how much you accomplished. You mapped an initiative, you defined at least one target of done, you have a better estimate of the time it'll take, and have reduced the amount of decision making you would have previously had. If in 1 hour you can accomplish that every day, think about how much time you're saving in the future and keep utilizing it because we may have done this once, but this is what creates momentum. And then I really hope you guys enjoyed the session. I also hope my teaching doesn't stop here. If you're a leader, I want you to help provide guidance to your team. If you're a business owner, you can change the trajectory of anyone that comes into contact with you. If you're a high performer, imagine if you shared this knowledge. What if just one person around you shared feelings of confidence, accomplishment, and freedom instead of expressing overwhelm, exhaustion, and burnout? If you found one benefit, share that with somebody. And then just a quick plug for myself. I love connecting and collaborating. It's probably my favorite thing to do. If you'd like to discuss any of the content or evolve on the tidbits you learned today, or just even want to discuss ways that I might be able to support either your business or you as a person and your outcomes, please feel free to reach out to me. You can contact me through, connect with me on LinkedIn. You can send me an email. I have my calendar here. I do have a website. It is a bit under construction, so bear with it and give me grace on that. But otherwise, I just love to support the successes of others and entertain what your big vision is. I just absolutely love those. I also included, I forgot to mention on here, as I mentioned in the beginning, I have a free mini workbook out there that helps you build the structure of this or just remind you and has some other elements that ask you to reflect and maybe see the changes just in your own neurology that help you overcome and get unstuck from the processes and execution you're doing. And lastly, I really hope you enjoyed the session. We always want the survey. Be brutally honest. I am always happy to take some constructive feedback because then I can apply it for someone else. And I will hand this over to Kim. Kim, thank you for managing this and helping with the coordination of bringing out everyone's voices. And if there's any additional housekeeping items, I'll let you take it over.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shira. And then also thank you to Nicole and to Gary for speaking up and participating. So as Shira had mentioned, we do have a survey from Sidebar and we've got the QR code up. I'm also in the chat dropping a link to the survey as well, just to make sure that if either one works better for you, you've got access to both. And then Shira, if you wouldn't mind, I know that you've got on screen the URLs and the email address for you. Would you mind actually just doing a quick copy paste in the chat so that way folks can just go straight to it if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I just find sometimes that's just like the easiest with the chat. And then also we've got a couple of minutes left. Is there any question or comment? I know Shira, you asked for that aha moment. Is there any aha moment for anybody who hasn't spoken yet? We would love to hear you. Gary, I think you made a comment earlier. I just got it. I just surprised Gary. Your head's gonna come back up. I'm gonna call your name.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to recognize you have some successes. Like if you have a to-do list, leave the wins on there. So yeah, I did do something. Otherwise, you're just going to beat yourself up too much. And then the second thing, if it's on your list more than a couple of days or whatever, it really wasn't that important. And if it was, someone's going to come back and ask you again for it or whatever. Uh, and sometimes you just got to learn to say no, both to yourself and to other people.
Yeah. Diksha, do you want to get off mute and share? Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for sharing all this information, Shira, and for organizing this. Kim, I just wanted to share that for me, I think the biggest aha moment was when I started bringing down my one large goal that I started working towards just this week into milestones and then to a task level. It made me realize what a large effort this is going to be. And, I was feeling so anxious that I need to get it done within this week or by next week, but just breaking it down made me realize that it's going to maybe take longer than that. But as long as I keep meeting these intermediate milestones, I'm going to accomplish this.
So glad.
Thank
We
you.
don't realize how much we carry with us when we store all of that information or the anticipation. We set ourselves up for a lot of just frustrations or failure mentality when we could have predicted that, as you just described. Seeing it ahead of time saves you that frustration when you experience it in 2 weeks from now that you're not done.
Right, exactly.
Thank you so much for sharing, Diksha. Shira, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, the proprietary framework that you have built out based upon your years of experience and expertise and getting stuff done. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today in this sidebar session. We are incredibly grateful and appreciative of the feedback that you're given in the survey, of your participation and engagement in today's session. And for any of you who have questions, please feel free to reach out to us and talk to us about the organization. Otherwise, thank you so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Shira.